Hey, hi, howdy, Derek Parker DP here. We're here. We've arrived. This is my one and only big board for the 2025 NBA draft cycle. Per usual, I've put a ton of work into scouting this class as a whole, but I'll give my usual spiel before I do big boards. I don't like them. I feel like they are effectively useless in a vacuum outside of team context. Things just change so vastly once you account for fit, developmental paths, etc. So really, I just think it's a fun little thing. It's not the end all be all. And I'm not saying it's not fun. It can be fun. Another thing I'll say is that I really like this class. I feel like consensus opinion has cooled somewhat following maybe the first couple picks. I kind of disagree there. I think it's deep. I think it's got a lot of talent. Even players later in the first round, I feel like can be really serviceable or good upside bets. So don't take these rankings as like, ooh, I really dislike these players. I think the whole first round is very good. And without further ado, the 2025 big board. Obviously at number 1, we have Duke superstar Cooper Flagg. Pound for pound, one of the better prospects I've evaluated aside from Victor Wembanyama. At 6'9", he's set to be a two-way force in the NBA, able to score with a combination of strength and speed-based athleticism, as well as pretty sound defensive chops as both a playmaker and stopper. It's easy to project Flagg as the best player in this class, but much harder to do so within the full scope of the NBA. Given his rapid ascension through basketball over the last handful of years, I think there's a chance he could function as a number 1 impact player on a team and potentially hover around the best 15 to 25 players in the league or higher for the majority of his career. At number 2, there's no deviation. I believe Dylan Harper to be the outright second best player in this class, and he too is in a tier of his own here as what would be a worthy number 1 pick in most drafts. Harper, to me, is prototypical of the big guard archetype, having size and savviness, with downhill force not rivaled by many. He should be able to function on the ball for the majority of his career, but moonlight as an off-ball wing with high IQ cutting, transition play, and projectable enough range shooting. I don't lean Harper as some number 1 scoring option supernova, but would rank him pretty favorably as a projectable number 2, and a player who does all the right things in terms of eventual championship impact. Kicking off tier 3 is a player who's long been one of my guys in this class. You can check the tape. I had him 3rd in my way too early mock in September, and Trey Johnson did little in his season with Texas to dissuade me from thinking he'll be a bona fide NBA bucket getter with ancillary skills. A lengthy 2-guard, Johnson's one of the more prolific freshman guard scorers we've seen in recent years. 19.9 points on 43% shooting overall and 40% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. Scoring wise, I think Johnson projects to be an easy 3-level scorer, eventually improving at the rim, able to do so on the ball with shot making and some slipperiness, but obviously most importantly with white-hot, versatile 3-point shooting. Ultimately, his ability to morph between a player that can go get a bucket, but is also somewhat gravitational as an off-ball option, is a reason I'm so high on him. Additionally, Johnson's passing is extremely underrated. I think eventually he'll be able to play make at a fine enough rate for a 2-guard and add some connectivity generally, and any of the defensive spottiness we saw at Texas feels mitigated by his length. Most simply, I have a hard time not seeing Trey Johnson as one of the more impactful players in this class and a future star. At number 4, we've got Duke's Kon Knueppel, another player I haven't necessarily been shy about liking through this cycle. Knueppel has genuine claim to being the highest feel player in this class, a major plus as far as my personal rankings go, and as a big-bodied 6'5" wing, he offers one of the more complementary skill sets in general. Efficient rim scoring, better than anticipated handling with a dash of pick and roll prowess, high IQ passing, stingy and underrated defense, and obviously most importantly that smooth and projectable 3-point shooting. Despite athleticism concerns, it's extremely easy for me to envision Knueppel forcing a team's hand and inserting him into the starting lineup with just unignorable positive impact. He's likely not the highest upside player in this class, but seems to have some sneaky stock as a team's cleanup or even 3rd scoring option. Rounding out the top 5 in tier 3 is Baylor hybrid VJ Edgecombe, per the consensus and myself one of the top players in this class. At around 6'4", 6'5"-ish, Edgecombe toes that line between big guard and small wing perfectly, adding impact in a variety of areas with hyper athleticism, high-octane scoring, defensive playmaking, and plenty more. There's players with negative tweener skills, and then there's Edgecombe, who simply feels too productive in too many areas to be a complete non-factor. Edgecombe's floor feels high enough with good athleticism and stingy defense, and the ceiling's potentially there should his handling and shooting come around, making him a worthy gamble for teams looking for a quality add or those looking for upside. At number 6, we have Illinois guard Kasparas Jakučionis, who at 6'5" saw a season I think cemented him as a decent upside swing with a dash of high floor too. There's plenty of refining needed in Jakučionis' game in terms of general efficiency, turnovers, and more, but his shot making, handling, table setting, and him likely being a wash on defense makes him such a tantalizing bet. I'm typically in on skill-based players in general, but especially ones who have sneakily good athleticism such as him, and I really believe in his eventual three-point shot, potentially even at a high clip, and with that he could moonlight as a wing in between lead guard reps too. At the end of the day, Jakučionis moves and is built like a pro, has a pretty simple pathway towards improvement, and is a coveted archetype, and I'm pretty confident he'll be a long-time NBA contributor. At number 7, we have a player I wasn't necessarily anticipating to think this highly of, but just popped so much on tape it was hard not to put him this high, Oklahoma guard Jeremiah Fears. As stated in my scouting report on him, Fears is an ultimate process over results pick. His averages of 17, 4, and 4 were great for a super young player in a tough conference, but his game is just littered with needed improvement across the board. Efficiency at all 3 levels, shot selection, decision making, limiting turnovers, and more. Still, despite all that, he pops on tape. He does some unteachable stuff very consistently in terms of handling, shot making, and more. Fears feels like a player who could certainly stand to benefit from NBA spacing and systems, and overall just feels like a lead guard prospect who could be worth pouring into. Coming in at 6'10" with a 7-foot wingspan and a 9'1" standing reach, Ulm's Noah Asenge has a pretty extreme combination of size, fluidity, production in a pro league, and youth at just 18 years old. And it's these things that lead me to believe he's worthy of being included in the star upside tier, with the floor of being a pretty impactful role player. Majorly plus tools, flashes of feel, a great baseline of play finishing, an all-time free throw rate, and versatile defense all feel pretty conducive to an eventual positive role in the NBA. And improvement in any of the volatile areas like handling, shooting, and more could see him blossom further. There's of course a rawness to Asenge's game, but that means tons of potential for growth, and especially so for a player who won't turn 24 for a half decade. At 9 is one of the class's more polarizing players, Rutgers forward Ace Bailey, a player I obviously land a bit lower on than the consensus. Bailey's a really tantalizing wing bet. 6'9" in shoes, plus athleticism, plenty of fluidity, expert level shot making laden with micro moves, and the potential for efficient 3-level scoring. Should the dots be connected, Bailey has all the tools to be a two-way star level wing. But at the end of the day, the lack of true basketball feel leaves me with a few too many questions, namely regarding shot selection, decision making, passing, and handling, to feel that great about his eventual outcome. Ultimately, I trust Bailey will be a major NBA contributor in terms of the shot making and defensive versatility, but one that has potentially more work ahead of him than some think, especially if he's not keen on taking a lesser role, but even still, I'm not so reserved to keep him out of the star upside tier. Rounding out the top 10 but kicking off tier 5 is Arizona's Carter Bryant. Lengthy, higher field 3-and-D wings don't grow on trees, and Bryant, despite low on-paper output in his true freshman season, projects to be just that. Averages of 6.5 points and 4 rebounds in just 19 minutes per game are largely offset by some of the best defense in the class, a fluid stroke from beyond the arc, and just generally doing the right thing pretty consistently. Bryant probably has a lower floor and what I'd consider a high-level starter, but an immensely high floor as a general impact role player, and he should be an easy bet for any number of late lotto teams. At number 11 is our first true center prospect, Duke's Kamon Malawach. At an unteachable 7'2", Malawach saw a generally productive season anchoring Duke's paint, posting 8.6 points, 6.6 rebounds, and 1.3 blocks, while shooting a blistering 71% overall. There can be some uneasiness in drafting these raw, project-y bigs, but Malawach feels in the least serviceable as a rim runner and general shot deterrent, with plenty of growing to do in defending in space, handling the ball in moderation, and potentially even shooting from beyond the arc. I think Malawach can be a starting caliber big in the league, though with a pretty wide range of outcomes landing just outside the top 10 here. At number 12, we have 6'10" big Thomas Sorber, who came on for Georgetown as one of the draft's biggest surprises this year. He played in just 26 games as a true freshman before suffering a season-ending foot injury, but was massively productive until then, scoring 14.5 points, grabbing 8.5 boards, dishing 2.4 assists, with 2 blocks and 1.5 steals per game. Sorber is somewhat of a jack-of-all-trades, master of none, able to score, defend, pass, rebound, handle, and more at pretty solid levels, but not really offering elite fallback skills. Prospects like that can be scary to bet on, but Sorber's confirmed 7'6" wingspan, just an absurd measurement, mixed with the fact he projects to have some baseline big skills and room to grow, makes him a lottery pick to me in a good class. At number 13, we have 6'9" BYU guard Yegor Demon, another one of the more polarizing prospects in the 25 class. Jumbo guard can be a thrown around term in the draft hemisphere, but Demon's a legit threat as far as that goes, offering the best passing in the class with good enough handling to project plenty of lead reps. Pure athleticism could keep him from playing full-time point guard, but there's still outcomes where he improves shooting the ball and defensively to play a connective wing role. I understand reservations on Demon as a whole, but in a league where advantage creation is everything, he has a unique blend that feels worth betting on due to some improvability. Rounding out our lottery is Maryland big man Derek Queen, easily one of the more fun prospects in this class, but one I landed lower on due to a lack of archetypal success. Queen's easily the toughest evaluation of the cycle. He's polarizing for several reasons, the first being that there's little middle ground outcomes between a go-to offensive engine and a player who simply can't adapt to the NBA without the right role and necessary opportunity. The primary reason I landed lower was that his archetype hasn't necessarily proven to be massively effective at basketball's biggest stage and can just be somewhat tough to work around in terms of general team building. The offense for Queen will have to massively outweigh defensive cons, which could happen given his prowess and feel as a scorer and passer. I've landed somewhere in the middle, ultimately certainly valuing that star-esque offense that he brings, while maintaining some reservations about his general playability. At number 15 and kicking off tier 6 is one of the more unique players I've ever scouted, South Carolina's Colin Murray Boyles. Take your pick as to why CMB is a divisive and polarizing player, a 6'7" tweener with no real outside game, but a Swiss Army knife playstyle from within it. He's more versatile than meets the eye on offense, offering a unique combination of speed and strength that can help him capitalize on both wings and bigs, and defensively has claimed being the best in the class with those same attributes. Ultimately, he'll be a player scouts and orgs either are completely in or out on. I myself am in, banking on the unique, toolsy, high-impact game that he brings, gambling on the fact he'll succeed without the three-point shot, or that it comes around with his touch and reportedly good work ethic. At that point, making him a potential star. At number 16 is Colorado State guard/wing Nick Clifford, one of the older but more polished players in this entire class. Clifford at 6'6" is one of a few players who's seen the full gamut of the collegiate experience, going from an off-ball wing at Colorado to offensive supernova at CSU in a matter of years. While his NBA role is likely to lean the former, there's still a chance his on-ball role as a super senior with the Rams translates to NBA success in the form of ball handling, jump shooting, playmaking, and more. Ultimately, his combination of versatile offense and defense, elite rebounding for a wing, and just generally positive game makes me think he'll be a rotational level player or more for years to come. At number 17, we have one of my favorite prospects in this draft, and a player who I think is set to add positive NBA value in the near and long term, Le Mans Noah Penda. Penda's got prototypical forward size at 6'8", with an essential 7-foot wingspan and more agility than your typical player of this mold. He'll earn most of his keep on the defensive end of the floor, showing off versatility across a few different positions, defensive playmaking, both on and off ball. Offensively, he's a bit of a work in progress, but to my eye has a very improvable ranged skill set and should be able to clean things up inside to a workable point given his motor, touch, and more. Overall, Penda just seems like a player who'll be hard to keep off the floor once things really start to click, which shouldn't take long. At 18 is one of the class's biggest pre-draft risers, Washington State's Cedric Coward, a lengthy wing who saw a phenomenal combine on several fronts. Coward stands at 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan, offering prototypical size for his position, while coming with shooting built in, having proven himself across several levels of college basketball, something not often seen in this type of prospect. I get the positives with Coward. Long, decently good feel, fine athleticism, touch-laden shooting, potential defensive versatility, and while I do see these things eventually mashing together to create a fairly good prospect, I can't help but be somewhat worried about the skill jump to the NBA, especially given he's already on the older side. At the end of the day though, I think Coward's more than a worthy gamble in the middle of this first round or a bit higher, and I'm fine to project him as a potential starter down the line. At number 19, we have Arkansas forward Adou Thiero, another one of my favorite prospects, and one I'll likely have quite a bit higher than the consensus. At 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan, Thiero is one of the most athletic players I've scouted, seeing a pretty incredible combination of strength, speed, first step, verticality, power, physicality, and plenty more. He uses all of this to his advantage on both ends in racking up dunks and stocks, and has general touch to his game too, having been a guard and seen a growth spurt. Even as is, Thiero projects to be a solid NBA player to me, who impacts both offense and defense, but I also think he's far from a finished product, and if he can shore up general efficiencies, polish his defense, and find consistency from beyond the arc, you should absolutely watch out for Adou Thiero. At 20, we have Michigan State one and done Jace Richardson, who came on as a surprise in the 25 class. Given that he so perfectly treads the line between point and shooting guard, will he handle enough to be an effective lead guard? Will he shoot and slash enough to play well off the ball? The good news regarding Jace is that he has claim to being the highest field prospect in this class, seeing versatile scoring, defense, passing, handling, and much more enforcing Tom Izzo's hand this year. I'm not confident that all of it translates to the NBA, but some of it certainly will. Feel is one of the biggest indicators to me, and while I'm typically not too keen on these types of combo guards in general, Richardson projects to be an impact role player for the long haul. At number 21, we have French guard Nolan Traore of St. Quentin, once a projected top 5 player in this class, who somewhat fell from grace due to a lackluster season, but one who still has plenty of that immense upside dwelling within him. Traore came back great measurement-wise and still has a really unique blend of athleticism, namely his speed and first step, as well as fairly unmatched scoring and passing feel. Traore is a player who will certainly need time to cook. The NBA jump will be a large one, especially given he didn't see a ton of improvement with St. Quentin, but there's a world where he's able to self-create, finish with craft, hone his jump shooting, and remain one of the more versatile table setters in this class. It's a bet I'm willing to take given the options remaining here. At number 22, we have one of the more productive and impactful true freshmen in the country, Georgia's 6'10 forward Asa Newell. Newell was a surprise but not necessarily a shock for evaluators this year, going for 15 points, 7 rebounds, and 1 steal and block apiece for the Bulldogs in the SEC. From an impact perspective, he did absolutely everything to quell tweener concerns that he could with a high motor, high IQ play, but in my mind, Newell projects to be more of a 4 in the big leagues, which makes a lack of true fallback skills just a bit scary. Newell's pathway to success feels simple though. Improve the 3-point shot, which he has to this point, and continue to fill in the gaps in the front court. Ultimately, Newell's fallback skill might just be his affinity for just getting better. At number 23, we have another popular late riser in the class due to confirmation of his 7'5" wingspan, St. Joe's Rasheer Fleming. Fleming had a really awesome season with the Hawks, averaging 15 points, 8.5 rebounds, and just under 3 stocks per game while shooting 53, 39, 74. He stands at a great 6'9" with the obviously all-time arms, projecting his NBA assimilation to be pretty seamless. And his ability to play finish, rim running and hitting triples, as well as see this stingy defense helps pass that test too. There's no singular reason I find myself slightly lower on Fleming than others. I think he can be a really successful NBA player. It's probably somewhat a combination of his lower-ish feel, lesser competition level, and my slight hesitancy to really buy the 3-point shooting. It all just leaves me a little bit cautious, for lack of better word. Otherwise, Fleming could surprise as one of the top contributors from this class. At number 24, we have Florida Gators champion Walter Clayton Jr., one of the best and most impressive upperclassmen combo guards in the class, and really that I've evaluated. Clayton Jr. has everything you'd want in a hybrid combo guard: elite shooting, solid handling, plus passing, scrappy defense. Perfect things that a player looking to be a backup point guard or moonlight as a shooter next to stars should have. I also think Clayton Jr. has legitimate it factor, whatever you consider that. nearly 50-40-90 splits, a 2-to-1 ATO, some of the best shooting in the class, and a championship as the best player to boot. I think in the absolute least, an NBA team will be getting a solid 6-man or rotational guard, if not more. At number 25 is Michigan 7-footer Danny Wolf, pound for pound probably the most unique player in this whole class. Wolf is legitimately 7 foot tall and listed as a big, but very genuinely has more claim to being a guard, or more likely a wing, than anything else. He plays the majority of his offensive game face up, handling in the pick and roll, getting downhill, and hitting triples. And while that sounds great in theory, the on-paper stats were murkier, just 13 points on 50% shooting, though 10 rebounds and 3.6 assists per game were very solid. I just have a few too many questions regarding Wolf to land way higher here. Will the athleticism and skill jump be too great? Will his shooting stay efficient? What's his role defensively? Will his offense carry to the same degree in the switch-heavy NBA? Though, if he figures out even a few of these things, we'll be looking at a really terrific player, and one who I'm pretty much always excited to watch. At number 26 is a player I very much like in Ratio Farm Ohms Ben Saraf, but one who's been exceptionally hard to rank all cycle given various factors. A lefty 6'5" guard/wing who's taken on essential lead handling duties for a pro team at just 19 years old. There's so much to like about Saraf. He's got size, a decent blend of grounded athleticism, the very necessary positional fluidity to morph in the NBA, some of the best passing in the class, and tantalizing upside as a scorer, shooter, and more. But I've just had a really hard time visualizing his NBA outcomes with the lack of true advantage creation in his back pocket. Saraf's success in the NBA will likely come down to his ability to succeed scoring-wise as an off-ball option on the wing, shooting, cutting, and more, while honing his on-ball skills and moderation. At 27th, we have Stanford big Maxime Reynaud, a 4-year collegiate player who saw a rapid rise to the top tier of collegiate production. In his final season with the Cardinal, the 7-footer went for over 20 points per game, 10.6 rebounds, 1.7 assists, and 1.4 blocks, shooting 47% overall, 35% from 3, and 78% from the line. The biggest draw with Reynaud is the 3-point shooting. Most bigs just don't have this level of touch or volume in their bag. He shot a whopping 5.5 threes per game at 7 foot, showing real prowess from beyond the arc, in addition to some traditional big things like inside scoring and shot blocking. The 3-point shooting will have to be deadly for Reynaud to find himself on the NBA court often, but if it's good enough, it should trickle down into overall positivity for the Frenchman. Will Riley is the magnum opus of upside bets in this class, a lengthy, skilled wing with high potential as a scorer and passer, without the counting stats or draft stock to currently match. Riley did well as a true freshman in a tough Illinois system, scoring in double figures and publishing a 2-to-1 ATO, all at 6'8". He's a really talented shot maker, doing things with the ball in hand that most his size can't dream of. And still, there's so many questions surrounding Riley presently. Can he become an even defender? Can he shore up consistency across the board? What's the role, even if things do come around positively? If he can answer those questions, most teams would be happy to add a 6'8" connector on the wing who can pull up with the best of them. At number 29, we have one of the more polarizing players in the class, French big Joan Béranger. Béranger's been somewhat of a relative question mark this year overall, seemingly with a lengthy frame and prototypical rim running, shot blocking tools, and those tools were confirmed recently with him having actual center size, being 6'11" barefoot with a 7'4" wingspan. The gravitation towards Béranger is likely due to his mobility. He's a fluid mover who should be able to eat up ground on both ends, be it finishing dunks or sending the ball away from those diving towards the rim, and these big archetypes will always have an allure. Rounding out the first round grades is Megas Bogoljub Markovic, a 19-year-old Serbian forward who's seen a productive third season in the ABA, drawing NBA eyes in the process. He's a rangy 6'11" forward who can score from essentially all over the court, diving the paint with a potentially improvable handle, a creative mid-range game on both pull-ups and pushes, as well as his most enviable skill in his 3-point shooting, which seems very legitimate to this point. He's a highly intriguing offensive player in general with potential 3-level scoring, but his defense leaves plenty to be desired and could for the long haul. I typically give rundowns on a solid 30, but couldn't pass up the chance to touch on UConn forward Liam McNeely, a player who would effectively get a first round grade from me and who fits snugly in this potential impact role player tier. McNeely likely didn't see the season he'd hoped for, suffering a few injuries that left his efficiency and consistency fairly low, but the vision is still there for a 6'8 sharpshooter who can get everything else to a manageable level within a team scheme. And finally, we have our 30 to 40 group with a variety of fun prospects that I think are worth gambling on. I'll quickly touch on a few. Hanson Yang's one of my favorite upside bets in this class. I am always down to bet on these hub-esque bigs with these later picks. They're such an easy, potentially high-yield gamble on a magnitudinal player with good feel. Kalkbrenner's size and collegiate production are undeniable, like him. Drake Powell's very much of that Carter Bryant mold, likely only having needed more opportunity than anything else. Very projectable two-way wing worth gambling on. And then lastly is Duke Sion James, a powerfully built wing who I just think offers a winning mentality and can stuff the stat sheet all over. But that's it for this one, my 2025 NBA Draft Big Board. As always, leave your thoughts, leave your criticisms, leave your complaints, and we'll see you next time.